Let's just face it, some people have a knack in finding the funny things in life. Obviously, there are many who are not so inclined, and I understand that. My guest is Scott Westbrook. For those who know him and appreciate him, you're already smiling. You're either thinking about the last prank he pulled on you or someone you know, or you're thinking of the last post he made on social media that caused you to chuckle. When I first met Scott and his bride Michelle, they had recently moved into our county. They had also brought a new baby into the world. Soon after the baby part, I saw the first of many pranks he would pull. As always, there are some who did not find that particular prank funny. Just for the record, I laughed out loud, and I still laugh when I think about it some 25 years later. I am aware that people are made up differently, and that's a good thing. Some of us are inclined to see humor in just about any situation. I'm not sure if it is a different wiring in the brain or it's just a personality trait or the family culture where we were raised. Maybe all. But I like to be around people who laugh and make me laugh. I am sure of that. Others simply do not find funny, and that's okay. God made us different. But there are others who spend most of their time looking for something that offends them, so they can enjoy being offended, I suppose, and maybe make their world a little more dismal. The things we laughed about 20 years ago, we're no longer supposed to find funny. Someone may be offended, for goodness sakes. As Scott says, we're all walking on eggshells, so we won't offend someone who doesn't see the funny in funny. In this episode, we'll delve into the mindset of a man who has a natural knack for finding laughter in the midst of chaos. And yep, you'll hear a few stories and hear about a few pranks, firsthand from the man who created them. There's a bonus lesson here, by the way. I would imagine there's some who believe the key to success in this life is to spend most of your time being serious and maybe laugh when nobody's looking. After you hear about Scott's beautiful wife and the 3 wonderful children they have raised, maybe you'll change your mind. Scott Westbrook, with his infectious laugh and light-hearted perspective, has brought joy to countless people. Hopefully you'll find a little of that joy in this conversation and take a walk on the path of funny. And if even for only a few minutes, get off the eggshells.
Life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. As I mentioned, I got my old buddy with me, Scott Westbrook. Scott is a funny guy. We text back and forth all of the funny things we run up on all the time. Scott, I think the first time I met you, and I don't know what year it was, and it may not have been the first time, but it was soon after I met you. I was at a Wednesday night church supper at the Baptist Church in Butler, Georgia, and you came in with Michelle, and it may have been your oldest child, Tucker, that you had then. I don't know what year it was. You can help me with that. You had a baby carrier, and when you walked in, you tripped, and that baby carrier with the baby went across the room. One lady wrenched her back. Obviously, you were carried on foolishness. You had a doll in there, and I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Do you remember that?
I do, Bruce. It was in the late 90s because Tucker's now 26, and one of the you know how you are with your first child. You treat them like they're, an egg. You're scared you're going to drop them and all. We were young parents, and I was carrying Michelle was in the nursery with Tucker, and I was carrying the baby carrier, which was a lot different than what they are today, obviously. And I had blankets piled in there and all that, and everybody thought the baby, because it was in the wintertime, they thought that Tucker was in there. And I was like, no. After about 2 or 3 times of me explaining Tucker's in the nursery, I said, there's some folks that think Tucker's in here. I can have some fun with this. So yes, that's exactly what I did. And probably the lady who hurt her back will probably be listening to this podcast. She won't find it nearly as funny as you and I did, but that was not my intention of hurting anybody, but yes, the mother instinct kicked in on a lot of women, and they sure, yeah. And then I think Michelle later that night told me that 2 or 3 people, she had no idea what happened, but 2 or 3 people came to the nursery and they just looked at Michelle and shook their head and said, "Your husband."
Well, you hadn't been here long. People did. I don't know how long y'all had been here. How long had you been?
Probably about a year. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe about a year, because
maybe I just started going up there. I don't know. But it was funny to me. That's the problem about humor. Mm-hmm. What you and I find funny, somebody else may not find funny. And, after I knew the baby was okay, I laughed. If I'd have thought it was a real baby in there, I would have been upset. But it was funny to me. The way the world works, what you and I think is funny, somebody else may not think it's funny, right?
Well, 1996 and 1997 was a significantly different time than what we have today. And, I think it's probably, and I don't know, Bruce, if this is how your mind works, but we can't really control how we're made and what kind of involuntary thoughts we have in our head. But and your brain probably works the same way. I see something and immediately I try to find something funny about it. And it could be something that the rest of the world sit there and go, "What do you find funny about that?" I can't help it. My brain just sits there and finds something, funny about, a sign or what somebody says or what somebody has as a bumper sticker that they may not intend to be funny or whatever. Our minds just involuntarily go that, hey, that could be made into a joke or spun into something funny.
And I'm the same way. I mean, I look for the humor and stuff. I look for that. And what I figured out in my years is, number one, people love to laugh. Not everybody likes to laugh, but a lot of people love to laugh. It's good for them to laugh. Laughter brings people together. When you're laughing, you're not worried about what somebody's religious beliefs are or the political beliefs. You're just laughing. It's kind of like music. You and I just kind of find the same things kind of funny. I think that's why we connected as friends. I've never asked you this, but I bet you like The Office, right? That show?
Oh my gosh, The Office and Parks and Rec. And once again, even though Office was just maybe a decade ago, you couldn't make that today. No. You could not make it. I mean, the people are just, I think so many people mind, like you and I try to find the funny and stuff. There's a segment, and it seems to be growing in our society, where people look for a reason to be offended rather than to find something actually funny about something.
I know. And The Office, I believe, is the most brilliant TV show I've ever seen. And you're right. Get thrown out today that would never be allowed, but there's some funny stuff in there, and we look at it, I laugh out loud. It's just funny. Mm-hmm. But again, some of the people that don't find that funny, because at the beginning my kids were watching it, and I looked at a little bit and said, "What's so funny about that?" So I had to start and really look at a few, and then I realized all that tied together, and I realized how brilliant it was and how funny it was. It was absolutely amazing, that show, and I think it's kind of typical of you and me and what we find funny.
Well, I think because too, people can identify with that show so well because it's supposedly a setting that's a hidden camera type situation, reality show. But most of us who have worked in office settings can think about a character on that show that reminds them of somebody they worked with at one time or another, and that's probably what makes it so funny. One of the things that my family do, and you might want to try this, Bruce, is when we're sitting in an airport sometimes, we'll sit there and we'll try to figure out as people walk by and we're people watching, find a person that we see at the airport that thinks they may look like somebody we know. And my mind immediately goes to probably one of the most negative attributes of a person, that it matches. And then I'll sit there and I go, "That's so-and-so." And then my kids will, and start laughing about it and everything. And because they know that it may not, it's just, it could be any, the way they're dressed or the way they're, carrying themselves or something.
This guy finds funny in everything, and he's a breath of fresh air. We're going to talk about his social media in a little bit. He's had some ups and downs there, but you won't find anything negative on Scott's social media page. You're going to mainly find stuff about his kids, and besides that, it's going to be funny stuff that he just sees every day in life and makes you chuckle, and it's good for us to do it. Scott, for a time, before we get into that, you started doing some stand-up comedy at some places, right? I
did. And believe it or not, the way it's spawned and changed is I try to keep it as clean as possible. So I would speak at some, just like you when you got started, I would speak at some churches and some, Valentine banquets and things like that. But mine kind of spawned a different direction because I do have an auctioneering license. And I do a good bit of auctioneering, like I do the big 4-H gala they have in Atlanta, and I've done March of Dimes and stuff like that. So I've taken what I learned in doing a little bit of the stand-up comedy and did it with working in with my auctioneering and make it a little bit different spin that way. And I had a lot of fun doing that. And I mean, it's nothing that, I sit there and expect to pay my mortgage with on a monthly basis, but it is definitely something that where I can channel that. And of course, like you said, social media, I've been able to take that and spin that into some pretty funny.
People are offended. People look for things to be offended by, and life seemed to me much easier 2 decades ago when you could just laugh at yourself, and you're not laughing at people, you're laughing at the quirkiness of life, and it's good for us, that is for sure.
Well, one of the things I learned from doing the stand-up comedy is what comedy I'm comfortable doing. And the 2 things that I'm most comfortable with is self-deprecating humor and observational humor, which, the observational humor is kind of a Jerry Seinfeld. And of course, then you got the Rodney Dangerfield is the self-deprecating. Yeah. But one thing I like about self-deprecating is if you're making fun of yourself, nobody else gets offended.
Right. I know you're spreading cheer in the world. A lot of people know you. You know a heck of a lot of people. Again, I'm talking to Scott Westbrook. So Scott, let's talk about, you've got a Facebook page, and I love to look at it because, as you know, most Facebook accounts, there's a lot of negativity. People expressing their opinion one way or the other, and it's just a lot of stuff that kind of drags you down. I love to look at people that post pictures of the family and talk about the family and all that, but you do that, but you also are always, wherever you are, you're posting something funny, or you're posting something you saw, and like you said, you slant it in a funny way. You make people chuckle when they read it. So you were going along with that, and somewhere along the line, somebody stole your Facebook identification. Talk about all that. Talk about how that happened. That was crazy. Most people, when they get hacked, they get it back, but you were never able to get your account back, right?
Well, I haven't yet. That's correct. This is what happened. We were at a football camp up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I woke up early one morning in the hotel. Michelle Carson's still asleep. Picked up my phone, logged on to Facebook, and when I did, it showed that some attractive young, it looked like some 20-something-year-old woman, it was a foreign-sounding name, had accepted a friend request from me, and I was like, I didn't send that person a friend request. I have no idea who that is. So I went to the page and unfriended them immediately. Well, when I did that, the floodgates opened, and all of a sudden, these things popped up and said, your Facebook account has been flagged for $1. And I'm telling you, some pretty serious accusations. I was like going, what's going on? So I was trying to log out, and because I said, I've been hacked. Let me change my password. Well, that was my problem, is the password I had was the same password I had on other things. And I think probably some obscure website I had used that password on, and people probably just tried that password on the Facebook account. And anyway, but within just 20 seconds, my Facebook account disappeared. It was gone. There was no way to log in, no way to get it back. I tried everything. I tried through Michelle's Facebook account. I tried through Twitter. I tried through email. I tried through, if you think you can pick up the phone call and call Facebook and get somebody on the phone, you ain't gonna be able to do that. I can tell you that.
There's nobody there.
But when I Googled the situation, I found out there were a lot of people in my same circumstance. The same thing happened to them, and a lot of people. I don't make a living on my Facebook account, but there was a lot of people that did make a living, and they lost their entire income stream, and Facebook would not help them out at all. Well, I went as far as sending a certified letter to Mark Zuckerberg. That's what I did. I mean, I did the old snail mail and sent it to us. We never got that he signed for it or any of that kind of stuff, but I did all that. Well, I started another Facebook account. I didn't want to, and Michelle was like, "You need to," and I was like, I can do Twitter and not worry about this mess. Well,
but you had all your pictures of all your kids.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff on there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone. It's gone. Yeah, memories.
It's almost like a diary of your life.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The memories, all that kind of stuff that were saved, just completely gone. So, started another Facebook account, and about 2 or 3 months into it, a friend of mine from high school who's an attorney in Columbus picked up the phone, and he lost his Facebook about the same weekend I did. And I tell you, it's obviously something. It was either a Russian hack or something. The reason I say that is it also hacked my Spotify account, and you know how Spotify will suggest songs for you based on what you're listening to and stuff. I logged onto my Spotify account a week later and had all these Russian songs they were suggesting that I listened to. And so I was like, okay, they hacked other things.
That's really scary, really.
It is. Anyway, so a buddy of mine who's an attorney in Columbus, we graduated high school together, called me up and he said, somebody told me the same thing happened to your Facebook that happened to mine. And I said, yeah, and we talked, and he said, same thing happened. He said, well, I tried to get in touch with him. I tried to call. I said, same thing, nothing. Yep. He said, yep. He said, I Googled and it looks like a bunch of other people. I said, yes, that's right. He said, I sued him. I said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, I said, well, sue him for me too. He said, we'll get into that, Scott. He said, I sued them and they ignored me. And he said, I got a default judgment on them for $50,000. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, now they've kind of hired a local attorney and they want to talk to me now that I got a default judgment. I'm trying to get them. So he if you Google him, and his name's Jason Crawford, and he actually, he and I talked at lunch today, and we're kind of working together on trying to put all these people together, because and I shared it on my page, once it got to the news, he's told me he's got people have contacted him from Australia, Canada, all over the world, that it's happened to them. And so he's looking into seeing what he may be able to do for everybody in this situation.
So are you able to go get on your new account and search for your old account and see it, or it's not there?
It's like it's never existed.
So you don't even see it at all?
Nothing, no.
You lost all that stuff, but you're still entertaining the world with your Facebook. I'm glad you're out there. You certainly, like I said, you're a breath of fresh air. Let's go back. You grew up in Alpharetta, which is north of Atlanta, a small town. That has changed, hasn't it? A little bit, right?
It's funny. One of the main thoroughfares in Alpharetta area now, you'll hear everybody refer to it when they give traffic reports as Mansell Road. My great-grandmother was a Mansell. It's pronounced Mansell. The family pronounces it Mansell, but now all the people that have come in the community afterwards have changed the pronunciation as Mansell. But, it's something we always joke about because we have a Mansell family reunion each year. It's changed significantly. I mean, there's an ultra high-end restaurant where my grandfather's country store is located. I think Tom Glavine lives, like a 3-iron shot from my grandfather's country store that's now is called the Union Restaurant. My parents, you'll love this, Bruce, my parents have not stepped foot in that restaurant because they serve alcohol.
Well, I have stepped foot in that restaurant. David, our oldest son, his wife and family live probably a mile from there, 2 miles at the most, and we ate in there. It was great, and I think I called you when I walked out of there. When you moved to Taylor County, you've got this thing for small towns, right? I probably did it by default. It seems like you moved down here intentionally to live in a small town.
You can blame my wife for that, because I always get, when I start talking to people and they meet me for the first time, they'll ask me, I'll say, well, I grew up in Alpharetta. They're like, well, how did you get in Butler, Georgia from Alpharetta? And I'll look over, look around, look right, look left, and look at them and get real low, and I'll say, witness protection.
Yeah, right.
And then you'd be surprised how many people kind of go, they're taken back by that. But then I'll tell them, I say, well, my wife was getting her master's at Auburn. This was in the early to mid 90s. I was working for the city of Columbus, doing commercial property appraisals. A job opened up in Butler, of all places, and for what I was doing, in the courthouse and things like that. I was young and, pretty overconfident in my abilities. And so I put in for a job that normally people in their late 30s or early 40s get. And I was 24 years old. And I put in for the job and got the job. And now for a few months there, Michelle was at Auburn, and I'd just see her on weekends. I would come work here Monday through Friday and go see her on the weekends. And as soon as she graduated, I guess we had not had the discussion, but I told her, I said, she got close to graduation. I said, well, look, we need to make plans. We'll move back to Alpharetta and we'll go up there and I'll, start a business up there or something. And she's like, I don't really want to raise a family up there or deal with that traffic. And so I think let's try to raise a family in a small town. Well, I looked at her like she was crazy. Like, there's no way I can make a living, in a small rural area. I don't know anybody here. I don't have any contacts, but she was my wife and I loved her. And
now you know everybody for sure. Everybody knows you.
we did a pretty big geographical footprint. It's worked out well. So but yeah, it's funny. When I go back to my class reunions, Bruce, and see all my friends who live in the Atlanta area, a lot of them maybe listen to this, so many said, Scott, we wish we'd have done like you. We wish we would have, when we were young, got out of this rat race and going to a small town. And I always tell people, I say, look, the difference between living in Atlanta and living in a, small rural South Georgia, you're just trading one bag of snakes for another, really and truly. But in a small town, the bag of snakes is a little more manageable typically. I mean, the families that your kid's going to spend the night with. If your son or daughter starts dating somebody, you've probably known their parents for many, many years. In a metropolitan area, that's not necessarily the case.
No,
you may not know
impossible. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's some drawbacks, but there's also the biggest thing is everybody knows everybody. I moved about 20 years ago, actually, a little over 20 years ago. But, I remember if we missed church, my neighbor was Miss Winifred, and she would call to see our car and said, I see you didn't go to church today. Or somebody sick over there? Nobody missed anything, It was just living in a small town. There's some funny stuff that happens. I know you've had some experiences that happen in a small town that you probably won't get in the city, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, the fact that everybody knows everybody can kind of be a double-edged sword, too, because, you remember one time we had a new preacher in the community, and he hadn't been here maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but yet everybody knew him, but he didn't know anybody. And so I saw him at the Piggly Wiggly, and of course, the people would see him and they'd come up and introduce themselves to him, just like it's done in a small town. It's overwhelming at first, but you get to where you know everybody and who's related to what and all that kind of stuff. Well, he was distracted talking to all these people, and I don't know if you remember, but I kind of put a 6-pack of beer in his grocery cart and just kind of covered it up while he was talking to somebody an aisle over. And I just hung around the store a little bit, and he got to the front and started putting his groceries up, made sure I was right behind him when it happened, So the fact that everybody sometimes, can come back and bite you in the rear end with the way you and I like to do things.
So that reminds me, I'll never forget, and I was a Methodist then, but we had a new Baptist preacher that came to town. We were playing golf in Reynolds, and there were 4 of us. We were teeing off number 6. And the guy running the golf shop, Chuck Bishop, brought the new preacher out, and Dr. Watley he was a deacon at the church, and he'd already met him, so he brought him out, and Dr. Watley introduced us to the new preacher. And me and my buddy were sitting in the cart, and Dr. Watley and my daddy were in another cart, and we all met the new preacher. Glad to have you in Reynolds. This is wonderful. Daddy teed off, and the new preacher said, that was a damn good shot. I said, did he say what I thought he said? As we were driving down, did I mishear that? He said, no, that's what he said. But anyway, a lot of stuff happened in a small town, and you were talking about the church and the preachers. There's been a lot of stuff happen. You go to a small church, and you get to know all the characters. Church is obviously a serious place, but there's some funny things happen in church. The funniest things happen when you're not supposed to be laughing, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. When we had a men's retreat one time down at Friendship Camp, and you and I, and there were probably, 20 or 30 people down there, and we were staying in those cabins, and you know how those cabins were at Friendship Camp. They're bunk beds. You're all within about 4 feet of each other. The bunk beds are stacked up. I had planned on this a week or 2 before, and I kind of let everybody know except the preacher. I had bought a purple thong. Do you remember this, Bruce?
I may remember it as you tell it, but I don't remember it right now.
I made sure I told everybody, let me get next to the preacher's bed. I wanted everybody to be prepared, to be able to not laugh and to make like it was no big deal. So what I was going to do is that night after we had everything done and everybody comes and brushes their teeth and takes a shower and everything, I was going to disrobe all the way down to that thong and just walk to this back, and everybody's going to be in on it except the preacher, The other day, Michelle and I were going through stuff, and I found that purple thong and told her, if I tried to put it on now, it would look like a body tourniquet. But that was one of my favorite memories, that a bunch of guys all around, and we were all in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, and we acting like we 16, 17, 18 years old again,
What did the preacher do? Do you remember his response?
He was looking around at all y'all. He looked at y'all like, do y'all see what I see? Are y'all not? Are y'all? And everybody else was in on it. And they were just kind of, like it was no big deal. Like, I was just walking around in a pair of white underwear or something like that. So.
I went to a church camp one time, a men's retreat, and somehow or another they had 4 of us to a room at this place, and this was double beds, and that's way too many men in a room.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm a big old guy, and the guy that was sleeping in the bed with me, he was probably about 5'9" and weighed about 90 pounds. And I'm sleeping in the bed with him, and of course I'm messing with him a little bit. He was a little more timid than I was too, but I'm pushing him over my butt, getting him to the side so I got room. So the next morning we went, and there was people from all different places. This was in Florida where this camp was, but there were people from all over southeastern United States at this camp, and the guy that was at the beginning of the breakfast, fixing to say the prayer over breakfast, he asked the crowd, said, how did everybody sleep last night? And I raised my hand. I said, I went to bed. I had on my underwear. When I woke up, I had on Jay Borum's underwear. And he turned red as a beet, but Jay was
he
a
should
good
have
old
known
guy.
something like that was coming. He should have known that was coming.
I remember thinking, I ain't staying in this room with 3 grown men. I'll go get me a motel room somewhere. But somewhere, I stayed in there one night anyway. Crazy things happen in church. So we had a guy up at Butler that I know you got a kick out of, Mr. M.P. Dean, and Mr. M.P. had gotten old.
Mr. M.P. died, 2 months shy of being 100 years old.
Right.
So he was pretty much, people that I thought were old, M.P. was old their entire lives, pretty much. They always, probably even you, Bruce, you've known him for so long, but your earliest memories, you probably thought he was an old man.
Oh, yeah,
then,
for sure.
But he was old school church that if somebody was sitting in somebody's seat, he didn't care if you were a visitor or not. It was time to get up and ask them to move. And I think he told one time a visitor they were in Della Trussell's seat and things like that. Well, one time he came in late at
Small
church,
town America, folks. That's what we're talking about.
We witnessed a miracle in church one time. Michelle was up in the choir loft. That's back when I worked the sound, and I was in the balcony, and Mr. MP had come in about 5 or 10 minutes after church had started. He didn't realize church had already started. So he's walking through the church, and people are, they're up there doing an announcement. He's walking in and going, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing?" Walking out, and there was a visitor, there's some family sitting in his seat where he always sat, And so, it just exactly like this. Everybody looked, everybody knew that he was walking in, church was going on. Guy out there doing announcements, MP's walking out. I look at Mr. MP, I then look at Michelle, and we make eye contact with each other, and we look and see, there's a visiting family in his seat. Michelle bows her head and starts praying out there. Starts praying, Lord, because we thought we were going to have a big scene in church. I sat there, Mr. MP and Miss Madge, they sat in the row right behind those folks, and that was a burning bush experience for me, Bruce, right there. It was a burn that he did not sit there and go and tell them folks they needed to move. And, because everybody in the world would have seen it.
He couldn't hear, so he talked real loud. And I remember sitting behind him one Sunday. You probably heard this many times too, but I was sitting behind him one Sunday, and the preacher it was getting close to 12, and he looked at the watch. He said, "Madge, when is he going to shut up?" Because everybody in the church, including the preacher, heard him. Even the preacher started laughing. Everybody heard him. He had a deal one time that the youth were doing a play or something. You remember that?
Well, it was what they were. You know how sometimes they'll get these kids, and it was something done back in the 70s and 80s. Like, you don't see it much done now, but they put like a big T-shirt on them, and one kid puts their hands in some shoes, and then the other kid standing behind them puts their arms behind them, and they're like, pour a bowl of cereal and spoon it up in their face and make a big mess and all this kind of stuff. Well, Mr. MP thought those were real people up there. He didn't realize that there were 2 people in the thing right there. And of course, he used some terms that are not politically correct nowadays that would finally I don't think anybody ever got him to understand that there was 2 separate people up there,
We're talking about Mr. MP, but there's some funny things that happen in church when you know the people all your life and you know everything about them. and you get older, things happen. But I'm sitting by my daddy one time at church, and he was figuring. He had a bulletin. I know he wasn't paying attention to whatever they were going to do. In the bulletin, it had the name of the sermon was "What Time Is It?" That was printed in there. But Daddy hadn't seen that. He's writing all over, and I don't know if he was thinking about borrowing some money or figuring out how to make some money, but he had figures all over because I was watching him. He wasn't paying one bit of attention to whatever they were singing. He'd stand up, but he kept writing on that bulletin. So finally, the preacher got in the podium. He started his sermon and said, "What time is it?" And all of a sudden, Daddy looked at his watch and said, 25 minutes to 12. That was the whole thing. Oh, Lord.
You know, right now, I think I have found my calling, Bruce. I'm the front door greeter at the church that Michelle and I go to down in America. And it's not as big as the church that you go to, but it ain't much smaller. I mean, it's one of the larger churches in the area. And they've put me at front door greeter, which is, if they knew me as well as you did, they probably wouldn't do that.
Oh, they should, though.
But but I have so much fun with people that I know. I mean, like, I'm gonna tell you something. Like Bruce, I'll sit there. It'll be like middle of July. They'll walk all the way up from the parking lot, and you can just tell somebody's slap miserable. They walk from that parking lot in front and get to the church, and I hand that person a bulletin, and they look like they cannot wait to get in there and sit down. And I look at them, I say, "Our air conditioner's broke today, but don't worry, we've got fans in there." And they just will sit there and roll their, and I say, "No, I'm just kidding. Come on in here." And sometimes I'll ask folks if they want smoking or non-smoking section, or, you know, I have a lot of fun with that. Oh yeah, I tell them sometimes, I say, if we've got a visitor and it looks like I can cut up with them a little bit, you know, I'll introduce myself and say, we're so glad you're here, and they'll introduce the family. And I'll look at the dad and I say, "How comfortable are y'all sitting close to snakes? Or do y'all want to sit further back from them? Or do you want to sit real close to them?" You know, so I hope, I mean, I don't think I've been in trouble yet with the preacher, but I'm probably not far from it, you know.
Folks, we're listening to Scott Westbrook. You do not want him to be your greeter when you go to church or at Walmart, for that matter, if he ends up doing that. You don't want him. He's got a prank. If he isn't playing one on you, he's figuring out what he's going to do. That is for sure. Scott, I want to talk about Michelle. Scott and I both kicked way past our coverage on the wife department. Michelle is reserved. She's beautiful, very quiet, just the opposite of Scott. Same way with Kathy. I mean, Kathy's quiet and reserved, and I'm out there just like Scott is, carrying on all kind of stuff most of the time. So I guess the first question is, how did you meet her, and how did she put up with you?
We met at Rock Eagle. We were 4-H counselors in college at Rock Eagle 4-H Center, and we were really good friends for about a year and a half before we started dating. So I tell people she knew exactly what she was getting into. You know, she didn't get blindsided by any of that kind of stuff. We have made it work for over 30 years now, and I tell people all the time, I said, you know, Michelle's a Shiite Baptist. You know, she's going to have her prayer journal. If you ask her to pray for you, it's going to be in her journal.
So is Kathy.
And she's going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she's going to be in there doing it, you know. And I'm sorry. I tell people all the time, I said, well, pray for us. I said, hold on, let me get Michelle. You want her, because she's a lot better. But I've had some fun with her too, you know, as far as like picking at her because of that. Because, you know, we were at a 4-H thing one time, and I was there. It's rare to see me there and not her. I think she was at the beach with her family, and I decided to go to the reunion. It was in July. And the head of the Georgia State, the executive director of Georgia 4-H, you know, I was helping out on some committee, and he, in front of everybody, he said, "Scott," he said, "Well, good, glad to have you, but where's Michelle tonight?" And I said, "Mr. she would love to be here, but she is finishing up DUI school. She has done so well with that, and I'm so proud of her, you know." So the people that knew me at that, thought that was funny, but there were some other people that didn't know me. And so, but I've had some fun, like my mother-in-law sometimes. We go to a family reunion every year, and Michelle's family on her father's side, now she grew up Methodist, but on her father's side, they were all Church of God preachers. When we have a family reunion, a lot of times they'll have a singing and some, sharing time, and occasionally somebody will start speaking in tongues, Bruce. And she didn't prepare me for that the first time that we were there. And I was 18, 19, 20 years old. I'm sitting here at the family, of course, gospel singing. I grew up. That's no big deal. People sharing testimony and things. I don't mean, but people started speaking in tongues, and I'm sure my eyes got big as dishpans. Well, so I talked to her about it after. She said, "Yeah, that's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that." Well, we started having kids, and then one time my mother-in-law wanted us to come up the night before and bring the kids so she could spend some time with kids. I said, "No, Michelle, we're leaving tomorrow morning. We're going to go down there, family. We're going to turn around and come back. We just don't have time to stay the weekend. I got work to do and all that." Well, my mother-in-law was none too happy about that I didn't do it, and she wasn't speaking to me. And so I told Michelle, I said, "Your mama is not speaking to me. She's mad at me for not bringing kids." I said, she goes, "I don't believe it." I said, "Watch." And I walked over there, and her mother just gave me the cold shoulder and all. So we're sitting there eating, and they get ready to start singing. And I look at my mother-in-law. I said, her name's Golden. I said, "Miss Golden," I said, "I know you're mad at me, but I just didn't have time to bring the kids last night." I said, "If you ain't going to be speaking to me by the time they start speaking in tongues around here, I'm going to claim to be an interpreter, and you ain't going to like what I interpret."
I saw something you posted on Facebook about the long sprilly spoons for eating fancy ice cream. What was that about?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I like, those some of those real long, small teaspoons. They got a long handle, but a little small. I don't know what you got. The spoon part is smaller than typical. And we've got about 3 of them in our drawer. And I get them when I eat ice cream. That's the kind of spoon I like to use. I, feel like I'm a little fancier and upscale than just using a regular spoon. Well, Michelle uses that as her coffee stirrers. And I was a little bent out of shape one time that she had not washed them and all that. And
she was using those spoons for less important matters. You were asking for intervention or something.
Let me tell you one other thing I do. See, because Michelle is the way she is, and that Kathy is the way she is, they're real easy to embarrass.
Oh yeah,
of course, with minding your shenanigans.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things I like doing to Michelle, and she's heard the jokes over and over again, but it's so much fun because of the reaction that people give us when we do this kind of stuff. When her and Claire, I take them to a new nail salon. Let's say, for instance, we were going to a nail salon in Columbus they'd never been to. I'd drop them off, and then I'd run some errands, and then come back and pick them up. And I'd walk in there, and like the biggest redneck, they just walk in, and I'd be scratching my belly, and I'd say, and everybody would look at me like they didn't know why I was there because I'd dropped Michelle and them off, and I drove by. So I'd look at the nail salon, and I'd tell people, I'd say, "Y'all got any job openings for bikini waxers?"
And you got your wife and daughter in there, right?
Yes, and they know it's coming, but nobody else does,
Oh yeah.
And so that one, and of course I told you earlier the one about when we were in the grocery store. She has several items to get, and I have several items to get, and we end up meeting each other, and she's gonna look at me and smile regardless. She just can't not do that. And so we're going down the aisle, and if somebody's standing in that aisle and she's looking at me and smile like she knows me and I know her, and the people in the aisle don't know that we know each other, I'll look at her real serious and I'll say, don't talk to me. I said, my wife's here somewhere.
Folks, I would hate for him to be my greeter at Walmart or the church, and I sure wouldn't want to be married to him even if I was a woman. I certainly want to be married to him if I'm a man, but I don't want to be married to him. Yeah, I remember I saw on Mother's Day that you had been in the Buc-ee's. You had your Mother's Day shopping done, and he carries on, folks. It's just little things he's doing in life and having fun and laughing and making all of us laugh. It's pretty good. Scott, you've also been through. I've been doing the same thing. I've had to. This weight loss journey thing. That's an interesting journey, and you're always making jokes about that. You talk about trying to find out where little Debbie lives or whatever.
I lost 50 pounds and I've gained it back and I'm losing it again. But Bruce, this is the thing. This is what you and I've got to be careful of. I think it's probably okay if we lose weight, but if we go in the gym and start working out, that's really not going to be fair to all the single women. I think
stay away from that.
Probably just stay away from that. And I have fun going in Buc-ee's now. I do get the fudge and the chocolate, but the ladies, like whenever I always feel like they give me the smallest pieces of fudge they have in there, Bruce. I've told you that before.
Yeah, I've seen that on
You know,
Facebook. So I just got the fudge at Buc-ee's, and they gave me the smallest piece, and he just talked about that he's on a diet. So he's always carrying. I've been on this A1C thing. They diagnosed me as diabetes 2, so Kathy's a great cook, and that was my problem. You know, she cooks all these cakes and pies. She think I'm not going to eat them, and tells me I got to watch my sugar. You know, it's nobody but me and her here. I'm going to eat the stuff, and now she's cooking stuff without sugar. So she makes these brownies and stuff without sugar, using some other kind of sweetener. I guess the artificial sweetener is going to give me cancer, but I've got my weight down and my sugar is better for sure.
After I finally wedged myself in that airplane seat this weekend, I think it took me a shoehorn to get down in there with it. But I told Michelle, I said, I've got to get back down to where I was when I'd lost all the weight. So
one of the funniest things too that happens in real life is when you're traveling, and especially you're alone. I see you posting this stuff, and I connect to it because I used to travel all the time, and I see this funny stuff. And like I saw one thing that made me laugh out loud that you would think of this, nobody else would. But there's a picture you posted of a car that was parked so close to the pole that was supposed to stop it, you couldn't get a sheet between it. And you said your response, what you put on Facebook, that captioned that picture, I'm about this close to calling it a day. That made me laugh.
We were in the state playoffs. I think the Final Four or Elite Eight or something for baseball, and my mind was not on work anyway, and so I took a picture. I said, I'm about this close to calling it a day and heading straight to the ball field.
See, everybody doesn't think like that. I mean, that's what's so fun. That's what's so funny. Everybody doesn't think like that way. So you also, during the draft, the NFL draft, you make comment, you post on here, you know, I hope I need to keep my lines open in case Kansas City calls me, and you decided to enter the transfer portal, and whatever the current event is, you're always making fun of it. That makes you.
Well, I try to stay away from politics and religion. Everything else is fair game. That's kind of how and occasionally some people can find, you know, and I do. Michelle, I do show her a lot of the posts that I think may be kind of borderline that somebody might get upset about. I'll show it to her. I said, should I post this or not?
She say no.
She'll say no, or she'll say, or she just like she doesn't get it because she doesn't keep up with current events, you know, because she's too busy praying for everybody. So she keeps up. So I have to tell her sometimes, explain the joke to her because of what's going on, you know, in the world, because she's just not watching the news or paying attention to that kind of stuff. You know?
You made a post when Raquel Welch died. Some of the younger people won't know who Raquel Welch was, but she died. She was 82 years old, and I remember your comment was she still had her fastball.
Yeah,
and you said Michelle didn't understand that a bit.
No, she didn't. I said, she said, Raquel Welch died today. I said, yeah, but she still had her fastball. She goes, what does that mean?
You've posted a lot of pictures of, a lot of them are gone because you lost your Facebook page, but you're always taking pictures of signs that people put on that they've misspelled a word, they got something funny, and that you see something funny in a sign. There's been a lot of that you've posted.
One of my favorites that was lost on my old page, it was county signs, and actually a friend of mine, a lot of people will take them and send them to me, and I'll give them credit for it. But when you do what I do for a living, you travel all these back roads, and you just, it's really funny what kind of signs people put out in front of their houses or on the end of their road or whatever. But this was actually the county. It was down in Mitchell County, and they had two signs. One was on top of the other one, and it had an arrow. One of them, it showed you like to turn right at this road, and one sign said Mitchell County shooting range, and the sign below it said Mitchell County Animal Shelter. I just thought that's kind of weird. You can let your mind race with what the fact that they got those two right next to each other. You know.
Well, I can tell you, folks, you can look at life through two lenses. This guy looks at it through the lens of humor, and he makes people's lives better. He makes me laugh, and I'm glad you do. I'm glad God made you that way. You couldn't look at it any other way if you wanted to. That's just how you made up. You see the funny stuff in life, and you share it, and I'm sure there are some people that say that's not funny to me, but you got somebody like me over here laughing out loud.
Well, and then the thing is, Bruce, thank the Lord that our minds work the way they do. You know, I mean, they could go a different direction, and we're looking to be offended. But you and I, I mean, we look at something and trying to find, or not even try, we find the humor. It involuntarily pops in our minds sometimes, you know?
That is true.
So I'm thankful that I was made that
Yeah.
way and not,
Well,
not on the other end of the spectrum.
that is true. There are people that are like you, and there are people that are serious all the time. And there's some people in between, but the way you look at life is healthy for all of us that know you. I can tell you that. Let's change gears just a minute. You mentioned you've been married to Michelle for how many? 30 what? How long?
30. We've been, let's see.
Yeah, you better get that
September of 91. So yeah, almost 32 years in a couple of months. And
Yeah.
of course, now we lived together a couple of months. I mean, a couple of years before that too, Bruce. She always loves when I tell people that.
She's gonna love you said that.
Yeah, no. She rolls her eyes. She goes, they're going to believe it. They're going to really think that we did, Scott. They're going to really think we did.
Folks, y'all got to know Michelle. She ain't lived with no man before she got married. I can promise you that. That is for sure. But I know Michelle is a wonderful person. You guys have a great family, and your oldest son's Tucker. Your daughter, who's absolutely beautiful, is Lily Claire, and then you got Carson, the youngest, who's about to rising senior in high school. Talk about them, 'cause I know you're proud of them. I'm proud of them. I watched them all be born and grow up.
Well, you know, Tucker's my oldest, and he is in Thailand right now. He is a student pastor at Georgia Southern with Crew Ministries. He got his undergraduate degree in nursing, graduated, went to Asia as a missionary 2 months after he graduated, left where he was in Asia. He went to a conference in Bali, I don't know how to say it. And while he was there, COVID just spread like wildfire. And they took him and his group back to Thailand, but never let him, so he had to abandon everything that he had there and just come on home. And about March, early March, he came home and had to quarantine in our basement for a couple of months. And I told him, I said, look, son, I said, you need to go to work. You got your nursing degree and your nursing license. I said, they're needing people right now. I said, Daddy, nobody's going to hire me for the next few months, because he was going to go back to school starting in May or June. We talked about it at Sunday school and asked for prayer and what he needs to do, the next step. And one of the people in there put in and said, hey, there's some travel nurses needed in New York.
Uh-huh.
So Tucker really had absolutely no experience at all, but he put in for one of those travel nursing gigs in New York. And once they interviewed him over the phone, 2 days later, he was in the city hospital in New York in Harlem as a COVID nurse with zero experience.
And he learned a lot about nursing there, didn't he?
He was baptism by fire. And the thing about it is, Bruce, the Lord put him right where he needed to be, because just about every person he worked on up there, he had gunshot victims. He said, Dad, I think every patient I had was probably homeless. Every one of them was homeless. Yeah. And so he just did the best he could to minister to them. And I remember he called us the first night. He said the supervisor he's working with, she said, I don't know why they sent me somebody with no experience, because Tucker told him, he said, I have no experience. And after about a week, 2 weeks into it, she told him, she said, well, you won me over. She said, if you had not told me that you lacked experience, I would have never known. Yeah. And so that right there, it was a great experience for him. He came home, he started taking classes, thought he wanted to go to medical school, took organic chemistry, got an A in organic chemistry, some classes they used to thin out folks.
Right.
And after he got an A in organic chemistry and told us all that, 2 weeks later, he told us he wanted to be a preacher.
That's unbelievable.
And so he felt the calling, and so he has really. I mean, if you see him at Georgia Southern as a student pastor, he took a group to Cuba back spring break, and he is right where he needs to. I said, Lily Claire got her nursing degree. She went to, and that's she's known since middle school that's what she wanted to be, and she wants to be a nurse practitioner. And her first job was at Northside Hospital as a mother baby nurse. She loved that job, and then did that for almost a year and a half, 2 years, and then a job opened up where they did those Botox injections, Bruce.
Yep.
And
I hadn't had one of those.
Well, I haven't either, and this is what's so funny, because apparently it pays pretty well in the nursing field. That kind of right now is a growing field. And she worked there in Buckhead, and I told her, I was like, Claire, I said, because I was like, people are going to be having babies all the time. Are you sure that? She said, this is exactly what she said. She said, Daddy, everybody does it. She said, well, except Mama. She said, but everybody else does it, And so I said, okay, baby, all right. And she's done that. And then in the meantime, this month, one of the hospitals in Panama City or Destin, one of those hospitals down there, recruited some nurses out of Atlanta. sent some, I guess, some headhunters up there, and her roommate are moving to, forget what part, near Destin or
to the
Rosemary
beach. To the beach.
Yeah, she's gonna be an OR nurse. So she's their first 5 years. She's gonna have experience in 3 different areas. I think inevitably she is so much like me with her independent spirit and adventurous heart. I think that she will probably end up being a travel nurse until she decides.
She's beautiful. She's beautiful. And then you got Carson, who's a great athlete. You guys have been traveling all over the country. You were at Yale this past week. You were in South Dakota a few weeks ago. He's a great athlete in every sport he can play in. I guess football is what he's getting recruited the most from, right?
Right. We thought when he started high school it would be baseball. We thought that's what would do it, but it switched to football, and of course now believe it or not, there's some sports that are wanting him to play both, and so he is. We knew with the transfer portal, we knew with the COVID years that these kids got, it's very difficult for last year's graduating class and the others to come out, because the Georgia Southern coach, he said it best. He said, used to a few years ago, I had 35 scholarships to give to seniors that are coming out. He said, I save now, I give about 10 or 15 to seniors coming out of high school, and the rest of it, I'm going to use it for transfer portal and JUCO transfers and things like that. So it's getting a lot more difficult. So we knew early on that he had to kind of differentiate his product, so to speak. So we decided, okay, look, which schools are not going to the transfer portals? Well, it's your higher academic schools. Those are the ones that are, because sometimes kids that are in the transfer portal, it could be for various reasons, but sometimes it's grades. And so they can't, that just shrinks the pool of potential candidates to go to these higher end academic schools. So we decided to target those. And he has done well with his ACTs, and the top 2 or 3 in his class. So he's really doing well with that, and the coaches, he's just got some just phenomenal coaches and instructors who really want him to succeed, and it's been a great journey. I'm gonna tell you, your podcast you did with Giles Amos, it was just so perfect for him and what he's been going through. He did get injured at a 7-on-7 competition over in Auburn, and so it has hurt him in some of his camps, because there was a couple of camps that he was going to go to, and he felt quite sure he would get off, or if he just performed at those camps like he has for his games. But he couldn't even walk last Thursday. It's a grade 2 or grade 3 quad tear.
The timing of that was awful. But, folks, the lesson is, here's a guy that's always carrying on foolishness. Obviously, he's not all the time carrying on foolishness. He's very successful. He makes money. He provides for his family. But he's got this beautiful family. He's got a beautiful wife. Everybody loves Michelle. They don't come any better. He's got 3 children that are all excelling, doing what they were put on earth to do. I think the lesson is you can enjoy life, and it can also turn out pretty good. You don't have to be serious all the time, right, Scott?
That's exactly right. I always said for the last 18 to 25 years, of our lives, we Michelle and I have been parents 80% of our time, and we wanted to put our kids in a position to succeed and let them find their dreams. Now, this time next year, we'll be empty nesters, and it'll be time for us to concentrate on each other again. We obviously hadn't neglected each other, but we just wanted to put the cookies on the shelf where our kids could reach them and put them in a position to succeed. And so far, so good.
Yeah, you've done well. They're great folks, all of them. It's a great family. They don't come any better. Scott, we're going to wrap it up. What do you want people to know about you? To sum it up, who is Scott Westbrook?
I think, and I don't know, I don't know exactly what to say to that, Bruce. But I think, just generally speaking, I'm just concerned, obviously, with the way society in general is going. You and I, from our perspective, we see that people are walking on eggshells and just trying not to hurt anybody's feelings, whether you intend to or not. I tell people all the time, I say, if you want to hurt my feelings, you've got to probably set out to do it. You've got to make it your objective. You're not going to accidentally hurt my feelings. And I just wish that more people in the world would have that attitude and not look for reasons to be mad and upset and all that. If somebody's going to set out and make you mad and upset, then, maybe that's the person you need to kind of steer clear of, stay away from. But the reality is the majority of the world is not like that. And the majority of the world is good-hearted and wants to bring joy to each other. And that's kind of what I wish folks would look at and
keep spreading the cheer, my friend. You keep You keep doing it. A merry heart is like medicine. That is for sure. That's right from the good book, too. A lot of people need that medicine.
Well, and Bruce, I mean, what you do with your podcast and your speaking, I mean, goodness gracious, son. I mean, you have really hit a home run and bringing so much joy and peace to folks. And like you said, I mean, it does do the heart good. And I've tried to kind of pass that along to my kids, too.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.